The year is 1921. In the United States, the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier has just been dedicated. Over in Russia, Lenin's introducing his new economic policy. The Communist Party has been founded over in China. The Allies have instituted reparations on the defeated powers of World War I, and as such, within a couple months, Hitler becomes leader of the Nazi Party, and over in Italy, Benito Mussolini's National Fascist Party has been established. But there are some bright spots. A young Albert Einstein is awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics, and Edith Wharton becomes the first woman to win the Pulitzer Prize for fiction. Up in Canada, they've discovered insulin, and over in France, we've now got a vaccine for tuberculosis. And how could we forget Margaret Gorman becoming the first Miss America? But all of that pales in comparison to a monumental shift that has just happened in men's grooming. The sales of safety razors have now surpassed that of straight razors, which is a big deal, as straight razors in one form or another have dominated men's grooming for over 10,000 years. And I'm sure, as all of you guys know, the decline didn't stop there. In fact, today, less than 1% of men have ever even had a straight razor shave. So what happened? Why did men stop using straight razors after almost 10,000 years of domination? What led to their downfall in less than 100? Well, to understand the downfall of the straight razor, let's go back to the beginning. Now, the first straight razors weren't really razors, they were flint and obsidian blades. Archaeologists have clear evidence that early humans used sharpened stones for trimming beards, for cutting hair, and for general grooming. And yes, I know that sounds painful, and calling these razors is probably a bit of a stretch, but come on, early man was doing what he could with what he had. Now, when it comes to straight razors, things really took off in the Bronze and Iron Ages. As you can imagine, as metalworking advanced, rudimentary razors made of bronze or iron began appearing in various civilizations. Artifacts from ancient Egypt, Mesopotamia, and the Greeks and Roman Empire show these prototypes. Now, in particular, it was the Egyptians that really led the way. For them, it was a sign of status, a sign that you were above the average laborer if you had a completely shaven face. In fact, it was a sign of cleanliness, hence where we get the term clean shaven. And the razors and artifacts from this time period are very elaborate. The royals and priests of the time used specially designed razors, and they were sometimes buried with them. Yeah, I mean, come on, in the afterlife, you want to make sure that you're looking good. Now, for the Greeks and Romans, having a clean shaven face was a sign that you were civilized. The Romans especially, at least the ones with money, prided themselves on their daily shaving routines. That being said, for the average Roman, he did have an issue with his razor occasionally rusting, and the way he would overcome that is through proper maintenance with a sharpening stone and a strop, which we'll get to here in a few minutes. But yeah, the use of straight razors continued on throughout the Middle Ages. And with that being said, we saw the emergence of a new class of worker: barbers. Now, during this time period, not only were they skilled with straight razors, but hey, you could go to your barber also to get minor surgery. He didn't really know what he was doing, but he had something sharp, and he had a 25% survival rate, so hey, you might as well go in there and give it a shot, right? Now, during the Renaissance, we saw a number of improvements, especially in the forging of the razors with steel. Cities in England like Sheffield or Solingen in Germany, which is still known for its steel today, with their blacksmiths and craftsmen, they were able to forge some of the best razors at the time. Also, we saw the continued rise of barbers and surgeons. Again, these were individuals who were skilled in the use of these tools, knew how to select the best, and a good one at least could start piecing together clues and details that, like if I get a deep cut on this guy, I probably need to have him wash this with some alcohol in order to make sure it doesn't get infected and kill him. Seriously, one of the problems with early shaving is the fact that small nicks and cuts could actually lead to an infection. In fact, just in the last couple hundred years, a number of men have lost their lives due to shaving infections. Guys like Michael F. Farley, who died strangely enough in 1921, he was a rags to riches Horatio Alger story of an immigrant who came and became a congressman, but died before he could have much impact due to a shaving cut. The musician Alexander Shrapin, an amazing pianist who once wrote that I am God. Well, it turned out he wasn't. He ended up dying of syphilis or blood poisoning when he nicked himself at the age of 43 using a straight razor. We also had John Thoreau, the brother of the famous Henry David Thoreau. A few days after cutting himself, he ended up with lockjaw and ended up dying in his brother's arms. And an interesting note about that, Henry David was so affected by the death of his brother that he didn't want to hear from anyone. He wanted to go away. And his friend Ralph Waldo Emerson said, hey, you got that cabin over on the pond. How about you go there and just do some writing? Well, he took this advice, and America ended up with some of the best writing of that century. But let's get back to Sheffield. Let's get back to Solingen, because what happened here was the Industrial Revolution. And the big part for shaving is that all of a sudden, mass manufacturing of great quality razors was possible. Straight razors became better quality and they became more affordable. All of a sudden, the market was flooded. Pretty much every man either owned a straight razor or went to a barber with a straight razor so that he could look presentable. It was also at this time that we got the standard design of a folding handle with a straight steel blade. To this day, we still use pretty much the same design. And it's safe to say by the year 1890, every household in the United States, England, and most of the Western world, you would find a straight razor and somebody that knew how to use it. And it was at about this time as well that barber shops became the hub of where men like to gather. They, of course, were getting their grooming, their shaving done, but they also like to drink some whiskey. They like to talk. They like to spend time with each other. Now, before we go any farther, let's define exactly what a straight razor is. First up, you've got the blade, a single large cutting edge that folds into the handle. Next up, you've got the pivot pin. This connects the blade to the handle, allowing the blade to fold. Now, in particular, let's talk about the handle, also known as the scale. Now, traditionally, handles are made from a material that's going to give a man grip whenever it gets wet. So we're talking wood, bone, horn, and later on when we got into mass manufacturing, plastics. Now, historically and throughout history, we've also seen handles be very decorative. And in fact, if there's any good argument for owning a straight razor nowadays, I think it's because a lot of them are almost works of art. Now, a couple of details about the blade you want to pay attention to are the point and the grind. Now, the point is going to be the end of the blade. You're going to see rounded points, square points, or French. Each offers a slightly different experience, although at the end of the day, they all get the job done. It really comes down to what do you want and what's available to you. Next up, you've got the grind, and this is how thick or thin the blade is. Full hollow grinds are going to be sharper and also more delicate. Wedge grinds, on the other hand, are going to be sturdier, but sometimes require more force to cut. Now, the most common materials we're going to see out there are carbon steel. Now, the advantage is here, it's relatively easy to sharpen and hone. It takes a very nice edge, while the con is it's susceptible to rust and it needs to be dried thoroughly after each use. Next up, you're going to see stainless steel razors. Again, the pro here is they're more resistant to corrosion, but on the flip side, the harder steel makes them more difficult to sharpen. And if you look around, you're also going to see shavettes. Now, shavettes are actually a hybrid and they use a disposable razor. And these are great for guys maybe just starting off, or if you're a barber, this is where you're often going to see it, as due to regulations, they need to be able to have a blade that can be disposable. Now, one of the things with a straight razor is it doesn't stand alone. It actually needs a few accessories with it. First up, you're going to see the strop. Now, the purpose of the strop is to align and polish the razor's edge before each use. Now, most of them out there are going to be made from leather, either a horse hide or a cow hide, although sometimes you'll see linen or canvas backings. You're also going to see honing stones. Basically, these are for when the blade needs to be resharpened. Yes, you can run it up and down the strop, but eventually you're going to need to get in there and sharpen the blade. And for this purpose, you'll use a water stone, a synthetic stone, or even diamond plates. Now, the big difference between the stones is going to be the grit level, and I recommend if you're just getting started, don't even worry about this. Just simply reach out to the manufacturer. They should have a process where you can send the blade back to get sharpened every few months. And of course, if you're going to be shaving, you want a lubricant. But in this case, I really would recommend a shaving soap. Now, shaving soaps are not like regular soap. They're going to have a lot more glycerin because their job is to protect the skin from the razor by giving you that thin surface that the razor basically glides over. And that's the purpose of the lather. Protection. So make sure when you're going over even a second time, if you've removed the shaving soap, actually apply it on again. And to do that, you want to use a badger hair brush. Now, there are synthetic options out there. They're going to be less expensive, but historically, badger hair gave the best application when it comes to shaving soaps. Now, what about post-shave? Really important with a straight razor, especially if you've got a cut or if you don't even see the cut. And this is why aftershaves contained so much alcohol. They were actually there as an antiseptic. Nowadays, you're going to see a lot less of that. And you're going to see balms out there that are very comforting. But if you are using a straight razor, hey, you are still susceptible to a deep cut. So do use an aftershave. Do use something that's going to clean up the area, especially if you cut yourself. Now, on a side note, if you really want to get a straight razor shave, I do recommend just simply look in your area. There are many barbers that are going to offer this as a professional service. Now, I've done this a couple times. If you make sure that whoever you're going to has good reviews, guys, this could be a great, enjoyable experience. Let's face it, the ladies, they have so many options. When it comes to spas and things like this is a very classic masculine thing to actually try. And yeah, don't be afraid to pamper yourself, because if you look at the history, again, barber shops used to be the place, and still in some places today, where men would congregate, be able to talk shop, be able to relax, and when they leave, feel like $1,000,000. Now, if you're looking to level up your style, you really need to check out my free community over on School. I've set this community up so we've got free classes that you can make your way through step by step and and learn the basic foundations of men's style. We actually have giveaways. In fact, this year alone, I've given away over $15,000 in gear that has accumulated here in my office, and I love sending it out to you guys free of charge. And I have to say, the men that are in this group are friggin' awesome. We've got a no a-hole policy. People treat each other with respect. And what we've managed to create in this community is a place where a man can come in and ask questions and get some solid advice. So gents, use the link in the description of today's video. Go check out our free communities on School. These are for you to become the man you know yourself to be. So what happened? How did straight razors fall from the peak of everyone using them to now 100 years later? Pretty much nobody does. Well, the fall started in the late 19th century with the development of the safety razor. In 1901, a gentleman named King Gillette patented the safety razor as we know it. Now, the idea of the safety razor is simple, and the name implies this was going to be a much safer way for an average guy to perform the shaving ritual himself. First up, the razor was smaller. There was a protective guard over the razor, and it became a lot more difficult for a guy to cut his throat whenever he was shaving. And that's what actually the straight razor was sometimes called, the cutthroat razor, because if not used properly, it could lead to some pretty nasty cuts. Now, the guys behind the safety razor were pretty smart. They were good marketers, and they were pushing hard. But it was really World War I that changed everything. You see, the U.S. military issued Gillette safety razors to the doughboys. So basically, you had millions of young men using a new device, seeing how great it was, how easy it was to use, and they were distributing these all over the world, wherever they traveled. And once they returned back home, guess what? They didn't want to ditch the safety razor. This thing was easier to use. It did an excellent job. And as far as they were concerned, based off of what they valued, the safety razor was better than the straight razor. And again, on top of that, King Gillette just kept advertising. He kept at it with marketing. In fact, by 1921, the word Gillette pretty much meant the same thing as a razor in most people's minds. Now, those two reasons make a lot of sense of getting the younger men on board, but why did even older guys switch over when they were so used to using a straight razor? Well, first up, it comes to safety. So a lot of guys, they were always very careful about going with that straight razor shave. They would either go to a professional, or when they did it themselves, they were very, very careful. It was an elaborate procedure. Safety razors, to be honest, you could be less careful. You could be almost, you could just simply go quicker. It not only saved you time, but you just simply didn't have to worry. Yeah, you would occasionally get a nick or a cut, but it wasn't nearly as deep. People would try the safety razor one time and realize, hey, this is just so much safer than, those cutthroats. And let's talk about that convenience and time. Believe it or not, there was a time period when people didn't move as fast. But as we entered the Industrial Revolution, all of a sudden people started working by the hour. That stuff was measured. More people moved to the cities. They were in line with the clocks that were just telling us faster, faster. People were looking for ways to save an extra few minutes. And going to a safety razor versus a straight razor, we're talking about a good 15 to 10 minutes. Even if you're skilled with the straight razor, the safety razor was still a faster option. And that brings me to the next point about skill involved with a straight razor. So unless you had a really steady hand and you knew what you were doing, a straight razor wasn't something that you just picked up. In fact, as a guy that has taught himself to shave with a straight razor, I have to admit, the first time I did it, I was scared. I had great tools, but up to that point, I just used pretty much cartridge razors. I hadn't even used a safety razor at that point, but I wanted to test it a few years ago. It was like a decade back. I remember even creating a video and doing this, and I was really nervous that I was going to injure myself. And for some of the guys out there that have cut themselves bad, they don't want to go back to that. They simply want a tool that gets the job done. And if that tool doesn't require any training or knowledge, all the more power to it. And let's talk about the nail in the coffin: maintenance and cost. So a straight razor, in general, costs more than a safety razor. In addition, if you own a straight razor, you know that after you use it every time, you need to run it over the strop. You need to make sure you don't want any rust getting on there. You want to keep the blade sharp. Safety razors, on the other hand, after you've used the blade maybe a couple times, you simply throw it out and you get a new one, and they're incredibly cheap and, again, incredibly sharp. And in fact, to this day, the safety razor is probably one of the best options out there for most men. I know a lot of you guys have gone towards cartridge razors or electric razors. Again, those are fine options, but if you deal with any types of bumps, any type of irritation, or you just simply want a more affordable shave, seriously, look at a safety razor. And if you're curious, you want to learn more about shaving or the differences between the different types of razors, come on, guys. I got you covered here at Real Men Real style, go check out this video right here. Hopefully you enjoyed this. And if you want to learn more about why did men stop, I've got another one of those videos for you right here. If you like history, if you like understanding menswear and yeah, everything that goes with it, guys, I got you covered. Boom, right here.